If your dog could talk, they'd warn you about what's lurking in their bowl. Mass-produced kibble isn't just unappetizing. It could be a crime against canine health. Mysterious byproducts, unpronounceable preservatives, and who knows what fillers? Sounds more like evidence from a crime scene than dinner. Ollie is here to crack the case on pet nutrition with fresh human-grade meals made with the highest quality ingredients. No mystery meats, no artificial junk, just real, minimally processed food made in U.S. kitchens. It's the kind of clean eating that keeps tails wagging and noses sniffing for more. With 5 fresh protein-first recipes like beef with sweet potatoes and turkey with blueberries, your pup won't have to wonder what's in their food ever again. Because when it comes to their health, the only mystery should be where you hide the treats. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/truecrime. Tell them all about your dog and use code TRUECRIME to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/truecrime and enter code TRUECRIME to get 60% off your first box.
Hi, I'm Jessie Prey.
And I'm Andy Cassette. Welcome to Love Murder, where we unravel the darkest tales of romance turned deadly.
Our episodes are long-form, narrative-driven, and deeply researched. Perfect for the true crime aficionados seeking stories beyond the headlines.
Like the chilling case of Blanche Taylor Moore, the so-called Black Widow who left a trail of poisoned lovers.
Or the shocking murders of Chad Shelton and Dwayne Johnson, where family ties masked a sinister plot.
Subscribe to Love Murder on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 422 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Had another birthday.
You did.
Always fun.
They had to call the fire department. So many candles were on the cake.
Yeah, there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, at a certain point, you stop doing the number of years.
Yeah.
And you just buy the actual numbers. Because there's only 2 of those.
But still, it was a pretty big flame.
It was. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Allie.
Hey, Allie.
Deborah Broom.
Or Broom.
Jenny Day.
Jen A, 8675.
349.
8675. 309.
309. Stephanie Harrington.
What's going on, Stephanie?
Ace.
What up, Ace?
Trish Maslakowski.
Oh, man, that's a tough name, Trish.
Kai.
Hey, what's going on, Kai?
Jen Silvius.
Hey, thanks, Jen.
Julia Longoria.
Hey, thanks, Eva's sister, Julia.
Robin Jordy jumped out at their highest level.
What up, Jordy?
And last but not least, Robert Garcia.
Hey, Robert.
And if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Tuesday Craythorne.
Hey, thanks, Craythorne.
Yeah, appreciate the new support, the continued support. We also had a really large PayPal donation from Robert Venditti.
Hey, Venditti.
So we appreciate all of that. Gibbs, we have a new episode out on TCAT where we're talking about Edward Kearney and Avril Jones. This is a very interesting case from the UK about a girl who was living with her dad. He dies of cancer.
Tragic.
She has some developmental issues, and these 2 friends of her dad agree to take her in, and things really go badly. It's a tragic case, but very fascinating.
Terrible people.
All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am.
We're talking about the murder of Mary Rogers. The body of Mary Rogers, known by many New Yorkers as the beautiful cigar girl, was found in the Hudson River in July 1841. There was evidence she had been beaten before she died, but over a century later, her death remains unsolved. Mary Cecilia Rogers was born in 1821 in Lyme, Connecticut. Her parents were Daniel Rogers and Phoebe Wade Mather Rogers. Mary was Daniel Rogers' only child. But her mother, Phoebe, had 4 children from her previous marriage who were born in the early 19th century.
One day, people will say I was born in the mid 20th century.
Will they? Who are these people?
I don't know.
And why are they talking about you sometime in the future?
Probably never going to happen.
No. Daniel Rogers died in 1837 in a steamship explosion in New Orleans.
Sounds painful.
Yeah, it does. I mean, but think about all the ways that you could die in the early 1800s.
Yeah, a lot.
There was just not that many things that were really all that safe.
I feel like you can make a show called like 1,000 Ways to Die back in the 1800s.
I think they have a movie called A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Oh, okay.
By the age of 20, Mary was living in her mother's boarding house in New York City. She worked at the counter of John Anderson's cigar store on Broadway. Mary was described as a beautiful young woman with a dainty figure and pretty face. Per the Smithsonian Magazine, Anderson paid her generously because her beauty brought in a lot of customers, including distinguished literary figures such as Washington Irving, James Fenimore Cooper, and reportedly Edgar Allan Poe.
Some very interesting people.
Did you go to dinner with these people?
They had some very interesting stories.
You knew them personally?
Through seances.
Oh, okay. But let's talk about paying someone because of their beauty and the fact that she would draw in customers.
It's good marketing.
It's still done today.
It is.
I mean, you see beautiful people in advertisements. Why is that? It makes you want to buy this cologne or this bikini or whatever it is.
Sex sells.
Or beauty sells.
Or beauty sells.
I mean, I know you go straight to sex, but I was talking about beauty.
Sometimes I use my dainty figure to get things
that you want. One customer later claimed he spent an entire afternoon in the store just to exchange teasing glances with Mary. Another man published a poem about her in the New York Herald in 1838 that went as follows. She moved amid the bland perfume, that breeze of heaven's balmiest isle. Her eyes had starlight's azure gloom, and a glimpse of heaven, her smile.
All right, do you think when she read this, she's like, oh, you melt my heart? Or she like, huh, what the
Did she have a really strange accent
yeah,
like that?
I think she did. Yeah. Or you think she was like, what the hell does that even mean?
Well, I'm not a beautiful woman. Never have been.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, Gibbs, what it's like to be, a really beautiful person, especially a woman, to have to put up with men just messing with you all the time.
It'd be tough. I mean, you're a beautiful man, so, handsome, but beautiful, pretty man.
Appreciate that. You're bordering on stalkerish. But no doubt. I mean, it was reported that she was very pretty, and it did seem like, all these guys thought she was. On October 5th, 1838, the New York Sun reported that Mary had gone missing. Her mother, Phoebe, allegedly found a suicide note, which was analyzed by the local coroner. That revealed a, quote, fixed and unalterable determination to destroy herself.
Okay, kind of harsh.
Wordy. The following day, the Times and Commercial Intelligence reported that Mary was alive and had just gone to visit a friend in Brooklyn. Okay, we got some bad reporting here.
Yeah, we sure do.
The Sun was accused of making up her disappearance to sell newspapers, as they had been involved in a hoax 3 years earlier. John Anderson was suspected of being in on it because after Mary's return, the cigar shop was busier than ever.
Hey, guys, I know how to get some more business in here. Mary, you're going to disappear. Not really, but we're going to say you're gone. We might even say you did something that you shouldn't have done, but you're going to come back and you're going to be really busy. Commissions will be great for you, so hang in there, kid.
Well, I don't know what the journalistic standards were, right, in 1838, Obviously, at the Sun, they weren't great, apparently. At the time of her death, Mary was engaged to a man named Daniel Payne, a cork cutter and a boarder at her mother's house. Mary attended church on the morning of Sunday, July 25th, 1841. She visited a friend before returning to her mother's home, where she told Daniel Payne that she was going to visit her aunt and other family members. She said she'd be back by dinner time. That evening, New York City was hit by a severe thunderstorm. Mary didn't come home that night, but her mother and Daniel assumed she was waiting out the storm at her aunt's house. Now, we often talk about, let's say, the 70s, the 80s, even into the early 90s about, not having cell phones where you could just instantly get a hold of someone. I mean, in 1841, they didn't even have telephones. So they couldn't call over to her aunt's house to even check on her.
I don't think phones even came into play until 1875, if my Mensa intelligence is correct.
Yeah, well, somebody I'm sure will look that up and figure out if it's true or not. Mary's mother and fiancé were worried when she didn't return by the morning of July 26th. Phoebe, Daniel, and Mary's former fiancé, Alfred Cromwell, went looking for her and reached out to her aunt, who said she hadn't seen Mary on the 25th, and she wasn't aware that Mary said she was coming for a visit. So you have her mom who's looking for her. That's understandable. The fiancé, that makes sense. But you also have her former fiancé.
Yeah.
Which is a little strange.
It is.
But this is a big revelation, right? From her aunt, who says, number one, I didn't see her. And number two, she never even said she was coming.
Kind of a mystery.
Phoebe put a short notice in the New York Sun, asking anyone to contact her if they'd seen Mary. The paper mentioned it is supposed some accident has befallen her.
Oh, the English back then.
But this is the same paper who published that she was missing and might have killed herself.
Yeah.
Seems like a strange paper to put the ad in.
And as the public goes, how trusting are you of this information?
If it comes from the Sun,
Yeah.
I don't know. On July 28th, 1841, two men were taking a walk near Sybil's Cave, a recreational destination in Hoboken, New Jersey, when they saw something floating in the Hudson River. They rowed a small boat out and found a woman's body, which they brought back to shore. A large crowd gathered, and within hours, Mary's former fiancé, Alfred Cromwell, identified her body. Now, we often talk about people, walking through the woods or walking along the side of the road and they find a body or find something that has a body in it. This is from the shore, seeing something out in the water and saying, you know what, I think we should get this dinghy and row out there and see what it is.
I have a feeling, hey, there's something floating in the Hudson River. This was not the only time that phrase was said.
Oh, no, the Hudson River, over the years, let's face it, has had a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
According to Crime Library, one of the first reporters at the scene wrote about the discovery of the body. She was laying on the bank, on her back, with a rope tied around her. Her forehead and face appeared to have been battered and butchered to a mummy. Her features were scarcely visible. So much violence had been done to her. She presented the most horrible spectacle that I could see.
Wow. Rough.
Absolutely rough. The coroner later wrote in his report, her face was swollen. The veins were highly distended. There was a mark about the size and shape of a man's thumb on the right side of the neck near the jugular vein, and 2 or 3 marks on the left side, resembling the shape of a man's fingers, which led me to believe she had been throttled and partially choked by a man's hand. It appeared as if the wrists had been tied together, and as if she had raised her hands to try to tear something off her mouth and neck, which was choking and strangling her. The dress was much torn in several places. A piece was torn clean out of this garment, about a foot or 18 inches in width. This same piece was tied round her mouth, with a hard knot at the back part of the neck. I think this was done to smother her cries. and that it was probably held tight around her mouth by one of her brutal ravishers. Her hat was off her head at the time of the outrage, and that after her violation and murder had been completed, it was tied on. The coroner concluded there was not the slightest trace of pregnancy, and therefore Mary had evidently been a person of chastity and correct habits.
Interesting how they say that back then.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the way people wrote back then is interesting. But do you find it strange that they're tying together chastity with not the slightest trace of pregnancy?
Yeah, back then, I guess that's what they did. Well, she's not pregnant, so she's
obviously a virgin?
Virgin, because she has the correct habits.
The coroner also concluded the murder was committed by more than 2 or 3 persons. So, yeah, I mean, as we went through some of these details, no doubt what happened to her was horrific. What is the first thing that kind of went through your mind?
Well, what runs through my mind is that she was known to be this beautiful girl, and they wanted to ruin that. So they messed up her face.
It did seem to me possibly to be very personal. I mean, obviously, she was violated, she was murdered, but the beating of the face, did that have something to do with, the fact that she was so beautiful? People thought she was so beautiful, and that was done on purpose because of that.
It could have been a type of jealousy by a man that didn't want her to use that. You won't get me attention because you're so beautiful. Well, I'll show you what beauty looks like.
Yeah, I definitely get that. But then you have to factor in the coroner saying, this was more than 2 or 3 people. The death of the beautiful cigar girl attracted national attention. Mary's death made the front pages of the New York Herald, Sun, and Tribune, which featured graphic descriptions of her body and theories about who the killer could be. The penny press cast suspicion on Daniel Payne and questioned his alibi, that he visited his brother and went to restaurants and bars on the evening of July 25th. The New Yorker, which is not the same as the current magazine, reported there is one point in Mr. Payne's testimony which is worthy of remark. It seems he had been searching for Miss Rogers, his betrothed, 2 or 3 days. Yet, when he was informed on Wednesday evening that her body had been found at Hoboken, he did not go to see it or inquire into the matter. In fact, it appears that he never went at all, though he had been there inquiring for her before. This is odd and should be explained.
That is very odd. Why wouldn't you want to go and check that out?
Yeah, no, I get it. I think they're right. Payne gave sworn affidavits from witnesses attesting to his whereabouts to the New York Times and the Evening Star. The papers announced that the documents proved Payne stands exonerated from even a shadow of suspicion. But does it? Could you get some people to lie and sign some affidavits?
Sure you could, especially if they're one of the 2 or 3 individuals that might have been there with you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not saying it was him. I'm just saying the paper writing that, he stands exonerated from even a shadow of suspicion, that would be true if these people are telling the truth.
Right. But how do you know that?
The New York Herald theorized that Mary was killed by gang members. The New York Evening Post named James Finnegan, a rowdy of confirmed rascality, as part of the gang reportedly involved in the murder. Finnegan was allegedly seen wearing a ring, which is said to have been one belonging to Mary Rogers. Finnegan was arrested, but papers soon reported that he was actually arrested for assaulting a different woman and was not involved in Mary's death. Again, I'm not sure about the journalistic integrity.
Right.
at this time period. It's like they're just throwing everybody out there as a suspect and also reporting things that obviously were not correct.
Trying to be the first one to get that story out to sell some papers.
Probably. That's probably the case. But you know what it does show you is that the fascination with true crime is not something new.
No, it's been around a long time.
Yeah. I mean, in 1841, they were writing about it and people were buying papers to find out, what happened to this beautiful girl.
I was reading a old Chinese article.
Was it in Chinese?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. It was back like 800 AD. And but very, very interesting. It was about true crime and very riveting. So, yeah, it's been around for a long time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
The story eventually faded from the press as no new leads emerged. On August 25th, 1841, authorities received word that women's clothing had been found in the woods of Hoboken. 2 boys were in the woods collecting sassafras for their mother, Frederica Loss, the owner of Nick Moore's house, a tavern in the woodlands near Hoboken. They gave the women's clothing to Frederica, and she kept it for a few days before going to the police.
And nothing like some sassafras drink, kind of like root beer.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've ever had it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what sassafras is. I have to be honest with you. According to the New York Herald, the clothes had all evidently been there at least 3 or 4 weeks. They were all mildewed down hard. The grass had grown around and over some of them. The scarf and the petticoat were crumpled up as if in a struggle. One handkerchief was embroidered with the initials MR. And I'm wondering, Gibbs, it probably wasn't that hard for Frederica to put this together, especially with the initials.
Yeah.
And the timing.
I'm thinking the initials were kind of like a slam dunk.
Frederica Loss became a local celebrity. After the discovery, she spoke to reporters and claimed to have seen Mary and a tall, dark stranger at her tavern on the evening of July 25th. The man ordered liquor and Mary had a lemonade. They walked off together after they finished their drinks. Later that night, Frederica heard a scream coming from the woods. She thought it was one of her sons, so she ran outside and found her son safe and unharmed. At a neighbor's house, she decided it must have been an animal. But after finding the clothing, she felt certain she heard Mary Rogers scream that night.
Boy, how strange would that be?
Well, I think a lot of us hear things, right? When you're inside your home, you hear something outside. You don't always know what it is.
Yeah.
And if nobody turns up dead, you don't think anything about it. But once something like this is discovered, do you then go back in your mind and start to think about, what you heard and saw during that time frame, and what you thought was an animal scream maybe wasn't. It was most likely the screams of Mary.
And then for me, I would be thinking, was there something I could have done at that time?
The Herald and other papers reported that this was evidence Mary was kidnapped and murdered by the stranger or more than one person, but no additional suspects were identified. The Evening Tattler did question the convenient timing of Frederica's recollection and declared the woods near her tavern to be the depository of the garments by interested hands. long after the disappearance of Mary Rogers. Okay. So, they're basically coming out and saying these clothes were planted.
Yeah. To throw the police off?
No, I think they're saying that it was more of like maybe Frederica's doing to drum up publicity for herself and maybe her tavern. Now, they're not coming out and saying it, but they're saying interested hands. And I'm taking it that way.
Right. And that would drum up some business.
The tattler found it hard to believe. The garments went undiscovered for a month and noted that a pair of gloves were found among the clothing, but Mary had gloves on when she was found. Meanwhile, Mary's fiance, Daniel Payne, was devastated by her death. He already struggled with alcohol, and that worsened with his grief. Daniel moved out of Mary's mother's boarding house to a different boarding house in the city.
Well, it was probably tough to be around people that reminded him of Mary. If truly in love, I think it would be very difficult.
Well, you were living in the same house, essentially.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, there were papers all but coming out and kind of saying that he possibly had something to do with her murder. And so, him already struggling with alcohol, you could see how none of that was going to help his situation. It was only going to make it worse. On October 7th, 1841, Daniel went out to different bars in the city, purchased a vial of laudanum, and took a ferry to Hoboken. He stopped at Frederica Loss's Tavern for brandy before he went to Sybil's Cave. Daniel drank the laudanum, but it didn't take effect immediately. He drank at a few more taverns before he stumbled back to Sybil's Cave and died. A note was found on his person that said, "To the world, here I am on the very spot. May God forgive me for my misspent life." And I think people could take that a couple of different ways. This is a man who lost the love of his life. He's devastated and he feels like he can't go on, or his misspent life includes murdering his fiancée and he can't live with that.
Yeah. Thinking about that day in and day out.
Right. And he takes his life at the very spot where he killed her. I mean, I think, you can look at it both ways. And that, to me, seems like something that the papers would have had a field day with, but I really didn't see all that much about it. As far as them saying, oh, this proves that he did it, or, something like that. Edgar Allan Poe took an interest in Mary's case. In the spring of 1842, Poe rewrote the story in Mystery of Marie Roget. The Mystery of Marie Roget was the second of Poe's mystery stories, featuring the detective Chevalier C. Auguste Dupin. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I'm going with that.
I'll say you did pretty good.
All right. Either way, I'm good with it. The story is set in Paris, and Marie Roget works in a perfume shop, but otherwise, all details of the story mirrored Mary Rogers' case. And we said it was alleged that Edgar Allan Poe was one of the people who came into the cigar shop and maybe even, took a fancy to Mary Rogers.
Well, she was the beautiful cigar girl.
Poe wrote in his opening, "The extraordinary details, which I am now called upon to make public, will be found to form, as regards sequence of time, the primary branch of a series of scarcely intelligible coincidences, whose secondary or concluding branch will be recognized by all readers in the late murder of Mary Cecilia Rogers at New York." So he came out and said it right away.
Yeah.
Right. These details people are going to recognize from the murder of Mary Rogers.
Yeah. Eerily similar.
Yeah. Now, in this story, the detective solves the murder. When speaking to editors, Poe suggested he'd actually resolve the case, writing, "Under the pretense of showing how the detective unraveled the mystery of Marie's assassination, I, in fact, enter into a very rigorous analysis of the real tragedy in New York." Edgar Allan Poe was an interesting cat.
Was he?
I mean, you knew him, apparently. But, I mean, we all had to read Poe, right?
Sure.
So, some of it, at least in high school, seemed like it was required reading.
Yeah.
He was just a very strange guy.
Kind of dark.
Oh, very dark. Possibly brilliant, but dark.
I think you kind of have to be somewhat brilliant to be able to write the things that he wrote.
You know, I will agree with that.
And I hope someone says it about me one day when they read my essays.
Because they're too good to be published now?
Yeah, I want to hold off.
They can't be appreciated until, what, after you're dead?
Exactly. And I don't have to listen to all the reviews.
Negative feedback. The story was serialized and appeared in 3 issues of Snowden's Lady's Companion. The 3rd installment was supposed to be published at the end of November 1842, but was delayed when Frederica Loss was accidentally shot by one of her sons in October of that year. Frederica Loss was on her deathbed for over 2 weeks. In her final days, there were times when she was incoherent. She believed she could see the ghost of a young woman floating near her bed. Before this, it had been said that Mary's spirit visited Daniel Payne and her former boss, John Anderson, and it was thought that Mary's spirit visited Frederica Loss. Okay, you're getting into some conjuring type stuff there.
Yeah, we are.
A little spine tingling. Frederica Loss died on November 10th, 1842. And we talked about it, right? A lot of ways to die. In the 1800s, well, you have to add being accidentally shot by one of your sons to that list.
Definitely a possibility back then, I guess.
But on November 14th, 2 of Frederica's sons were arrested and were brought before a judge and prosecutors for a hearing. According to the New York Daily Herald, the arrests were made based on an affidavit from Justice of the Peace Gilbert Merritt. Merritt conducted an inquest into Mary's death in July 1841 and concluded she was murdered. Based on the information he obtained, he believed the murder occurred at the Nickmore house, owned by Frederica Loss. The Herald listed her sons as Oscar, Charles, and Ossian Kellenbarack. Frederica was married, but changed her name back to Loss after she was divorced.
Well, the coroner thought it could have been 3 individuals. So here's 3 individuals.
In his affidavit, Gilbert Merritt described the sons as worthless and profligate characters. And this deponent further saith that he has just reason to believe that the said sons and their mother kept one of the most depraved and debauched houses in New Jersey, and that all of them had acknowledged of, were accessory to, and become participators in the murder of said Mary C. Rogers and the concealment of her body. Okay, so there's an inquest. This guy says that, you know, the sons are basically POSs,
Right.
is what he said in different words. But he also said that Frederica was involved. At least all of them had knowledge, were accessory to, or participated in the murder and the concealment of the body. That's what he was saying.
It's a big statement to make.
Several witnesses testified at this hearing. Frederica's neighbor, Nancy Ludlam, testified that she spent 9 days with her after she was shot, and she never said anything about Mary in English, but she might have said something in German. Frederica alternated between the 2 languages. According to Mrs. Ludlam, Frederica was crazy or delirious in her final days and talked about a woman she thought was an evil spirit. Frederica cried out, "Shoo away," but never said a specific name.
So maybe the delirium was kicking in.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like that. Mrs. Ludlam also testified that on the evening of July 25th, she saw a woman and a man walking near the tavern, followed by 4 others. Frederica's son, Oscar, was at her house that evening.
So saying if that was Mary and her date from that evening, and there was 4 people walking behind them, that those 4 people were probably the ones that killed her, and Frederica's son
couldn't have been one of them,
right,
because he was at Mrs. Ludlam's house. Now, in that scenario, the tall, dark stranger, let's say, is the one she's seen walking with. Well, how does he fit in?
Right.
Because he's either a part of the murders or they somehow separate before the murder occurs.
Yeah, or they beat him. Two of them beat him down while the other two or one holds her. And then he decides maybe he was married.
Or not. Yeah, he decides not to come forward for some reason.
Exactly.
Maybe threat of death but my thinking in those scenarios is always, if you're going to kill one person, why not kill the other one too? You're already committing the evil act.
Yeah. Why
take the chance in leaving this person alive? And then there's also the thought that, well, somebody would have seen him all beat up and that would have come out. So, that's kind of strange to me. During a later visit, Frederica told her about hearing a scream on the night in question. Mrs. Ludlam asked Frederica why she kept the clothes in her house before she reported the discovery. Frederica said she supposed something might turn up to make them more useful than if she had handed them over immediately. Mrs. Ludlam also testified she was sorry that she hadn't burnt the clothes, as her sister had wanted her to do, and thus there would have been no fuss about it.
So how could they be more valuable if she held on to them as leverage or as to use them against somebody to get something? Like, I have the clothes. I'll hand them over to the police if you don't do X.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what that meant. It could be something along the lines of what you're saying. Maybe it was that more about the murders was going to come out and that would make the story even more sensational, which would make her publicity even greater. Yeah. I don't know. She didn't explain why it would have saved her trouble to burn the clothes. But my thought there was the publicity wasn't all that she thought it was going to be, right? It was more trouble than it was worth, maybe.
Yeah, I think sometimes with good publicity comes bad publicity.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the bar does better, right? But you also have some papers dragging you through the mud. So I could see a scenario where somebody looking back on it says, I wish I'd never even turned them in. I wish I'd have just burned them, because it wasn't worth the good publicity to have papers saying maybe I was involved in it. Maybe my kids were involved in it, things like that. Henry Fredericks testified that he was with Frederica while she was sick and when her son Oscar went to Jersey City to get the doctor. He said a great secret would come out now that Frederica was going to die. He believed he should tell their family physician, Dr. Gautier, all about it. Fredericks never heard anyone say anything about Mary Rogers specifically, but Frederica's oldest son did say that loose characters were at his mother's house. Okay. Again, some of this stuff is so vague, right? Loose character. Are these people, capable of committing murder? People who did murder? Was he involved? Or he's saying it wasn't us, but there were some people at the house.
Yeah, they got loose morals, so maybe they could.
But it is interesting, right? This statement about having a great secret that was going to come out after Frederica died. What was that great secret? And how could you not think that it possibly had something to do with Mary's murder? Frederica's son, Charles Kellen Barak, testified per the Daily Herald, I and my brother found the clothes. I know nothing more than what I before told you at the other examination. I carried over the clothes and handed them to Dr. Cook. I often saw the man Cromlin, Mary's former fiancé, after the death of the girl. Charles was asked about the secret and said, I stated to Fredericks that my mother would die and then would know the big secret, all about the dead people, what became of them after they were dead. That is all I meant by it. That is all I meant by it. That seems like a lot.
It is.
Big secret about dead people and what became of them after they were dead. This is not just Mary. This is they, them. This is multiple people. It makes it seem like there was this big family secret about a bunch of people who had died and what they had done with them after they died. Now, maybe Mary was part of the they, them. Charles also testified that they never accepted any lodgers at their home. He added that Frederica wanted to take the clothes to the mayor because it might lead to the discovery of the murderer, but his aunt wanted Frederica to burn the clothes. He didn't say why. Ossian Kellenbach testified that he had no evidence to give light to Mary's death and did not know of anyone being brought to their house to receive attendance. He was not aware of his mother ever acting as a midwife. Ossian testified that Frederica's big secret was that she had the cure for rheumatism and wanted to tell their doctor. Dr. Gaudier testified that about a week before Frederica died, he heard a rumor about a secret, so he decided to lie to her oldest son, Oscar, to figure out what it was. He told Oscar that Frederica had a secret she promised to tell him, but couldn't because she was delirious. He wanted the sons, if they knew anything, to tell him. Oscar said he knew nothing. The doctor suggested it could be related to Mary Rogers, and Oscar said it couldn't be because Frederica already revealed everything she knew. Dr. Gaudier then visited Oscar in prison and asked what he was there for. He said Merritt put him there on account of Mary Rogers. His brother Ossian discovered the secret, a cure for rheumatism. So I got to be honest with you, Gibbs, there's a lot of confusing things here.
Sure is.
This secret cure for rheumatism balanced up against people talking about a secret involving the revelation of how people died, what was done with them after they were dead.
Yeah.
There seems to be the two things seem to be at odds with each other. Dr. Gaudier testified that he was Mrs. Loss's family physician for 15 years and thought of her as a woman of good character. At the end of the hearing, the charges against Frederica's sons were dropped and they were released from custody.
It seemed like it'd be hard to keep them based on all that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what evidence they were going to use to convict them. At the time, papers reported that Frederica Loss did make a deathbed confession about the circumstances surrounding Mary's death. According to the New York Tribune, on the Sunday of Miss Rogers' disappearance, she came to Frederica's house from this city in company with a young physician who undertook to produce for her a premature delivery. So this goes back to something that Ossian testified about. He wasn't aware of his mother ever acting as a midwife. So there, was a story that Mary was pregnant and that Frederica Loss helped her to end the pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because at the time, premature delivery was a euphemism for abortion.
Right.
The paper went on to say that there were complications with the procedure and Mary died. Mary's body was taken at night by the son of Loss and sunk in the river, where it would be found. Mary's clothes were first, sunk in a pond on the land of a neighbor, but it was afterwards thought that they were not safe there, and they were accordingly taken and scattered through the woods as they were found. The paper alleged that it was Frederica's sons who scattered the clothing in the woods. Now, I don't know what the libel laws were back in, the 1800s, but, these papers are really slinging around some pretty heavy accusations.
They really are.
It should be noted that Frederica's confession didn't line up with the evidence. We talked about it early on, but Mary had bruises on her neck, suggesting strangulation, and her clothing was torn, suggesting she was assaulted. Doesn't really line up with her dying from some type of medical procedure and then them trying to cover it up.
Right. Because even the coroner at that time said
it looked like she was strangled.
Yeah, and she wasn't pregnant.
No signs.
No signs of pregnancy and of good
moral character. Or something along those lines. But still, the Tribune reported, thus has this fearful mystery which has struck fear and terror to so many hearts, been at last explained by circumstances in which no one can fail to perceive a providential agency. So they're basically saying, hey, we solved it.
Yeah.
No worries, no fears.
We got it.
Papers suggested that Mary and her fiance, Daniel Payne, argued over an unwanted pregnancy. Other penny presses linked Mary to midwife abortion provider Madame Restel and suggested that her 1838 disappearance lasted as long as it would take for a woman to have a secret abortion. And we talked about this story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Mystery of Marie Roget, and the fact that the third and final installment had to be postponed due to Frederica Loss's death. The final part did hint at an abortion gone wrong, and the character Detective Dupin ultimately believed the murderer was a naval officer who previously attempted to elope with Marie, then killed her when she ran off with him a second time. But ultimately, Edgar Allan Poe was a fiction writer.
He was.
I get it. Some of the things were based on the real facts of the case, but the case wasn't solved. He wrote that it was solved. So his solution had to be a theory or based on a theory. It couldn't have been based on fact unless he had knowledge that nobody else had.
Well, there you go.
Over the years, many have tried to solve Mary's murder. It's been theorized that Mary and the stranger she was with were robbed and killed inside Frederica Loss's tavern. A man's body was found in the East River, which connects with the Hudson, in early August 1841. But the man did not match Frederica's description. So he must not have been a tall, dark, and handsome stranger.
Must not have been.
Another theory was that Mary's employer, John Anderson, allegedly paid for her to have an abortion, which took place at Loss's tavern. And it was the abortion provider who threw her body in the river. Others have alleged that Mary's mother had her performing sex work at the boarding house and arranged for her to have an abortion.
A lot of people involved in having her get an abortion.
Yeah, but a lot of these theories did center around her being pregnant and having an abortion. According to Crime Library, Irving Wallace suggested that Mary's former fiancé, Alfred Cromlin, was the father of the baby. And, to be honest with you, this guy, Alfred Cromlin, does come up quite a bit.
He does.
In the story.
I mean, he injected himself into the case when she went missing. He was out helping.
Right. And then he allegedly, if you believe the reporting, which is kind of hard to do with some of the reporting that we've talked about, but he was there when her body was found or came afterwards and identified her. Wallace also named Edgar Allan Poe as a potential suspect since he had reportedly seen Mary at the cigar store. But there is no evidence to support this theory.
That may have to be like saying half of New York of all the men cigar smokers, you guys are suspects.
Right, because how many people went in there to get cigars, but to also see Mary? Probably.
Right. Yeah.
Many of them.
Sure.
In the early 70s, author Raymond Paul argued the killer was Mary's fiance, Daniel Payne, but that she actually died on July 27th, 1841, not July 25th. According to Paul's theory, Mary had an abortion at Frederica Loss's tavern and survived the procedure. She stayed at an inn to recuperate. Daniel Payne couldn't say where she was, so he pretended to search for her alongside her family. He planned to meet her on Tuesday the 27th to bring her home. According to Paul, Payne's statements showed he was in Hoboken on Tuesday, searching for Mary. Paul theorized that when Payne met Mary, she told him she was breaking off the engagement. Payne then strangled her in a fit of rage, dumped her body in the river, and later retrieved some of her clothes and planted them in the woods near the tavern. Paul noted that per the coroner's report, Mary was in a state of rigor mortis, which indicated she was killed later than July 25th. The one thing I will say is, you go through all these theories. Some of them kind of center around, the same storyline. they involve different people. Some of the people overlap or intertwine in the theories, but where's the proof, right? Of anything.
Yeah.
And apparently in the 1840s, as a journalist, you could basically say that anyone was a killer based on your theory.
Yeah. You could just kind of make up your own thought there. I mean, what this author's saying kind of resonates, I think.
Well, it resonates on the plausibility meter.
Yes.
As far as, it's plausible, but is there any more facts related to this one than there are some of the others?
No.
I don't think there are. Now, the difference is by this point, obviously everybody involved is dead.
Right.
Has been dead for a very long time. So you can essentially say whatever you want, just about.
Well, that's true. Nobody to defend it.
But in 1841, those people were all still alive.
Yeah.
Except for Mary. And they were blatantly coming out and saying, this is who killed her and this is what happened. And it was just kind of shocking based on what we expect to happen today or expect not to happen.
Right.
But over a century later, the murder of Mary Rogers remains unsolved. Unfortunately, Gibbs, it will most likely remain that way unless miraculously some kind of new evidence is uncovered. I mean, just based on the age of it alone.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty soon it's going to be 200 years old.
Yeah.
That's a very old case.
It is.
We talk about a lot of old cases, but that's very old. There's a couple of things that, as we wrap this one up, that I kind of go back to. I don't know what's going on or what went on with this Alfred Cromlin guy. I get it. You're a former fiance, which means at one point you were very close to this person.
Right.
So if the person went missing, would you want to help? Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. But then he also is the one to, identify the body. That seemed a little strange to me.
I think so.
You have people suggesting that maybe he was the father of the baby, but it seems as though we've gone from the coroner saying, there was no trace of a pregnancy and that this was a virtuous girl, right? Is essentially what he said. Right. To then all kinds of theories coming out that she was pregnant and had an abortion.
Yeah.
A lot of those theories have that taking place at the tavern owned by Frederica Laws.
Yeah, it does.
And then either Mary dying during the procedure, Frederica covering up, maybe her son's covering up. So either they really did just stumble upon her clothes and then turn them in, or that was all done in kind of the aftermath cover up of the crime. But my thought is just by turning them in, you're kind of bringing attention to yourself.
Yes.
If you don't turn them in, are you even mentioned in the case at all? I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Is that where all the theories surrounding them come from?
Might be.
Is the mere fact that they were the ones to find some of the clothes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a very interesting case. A lot of people are drawn to it. Still to this day, people trying to, solve it, figure out what happened.
Yeah, this is one I just don't think will be solved.
No, I think it would be very hard. What will continue to happen probably is a bunch of theories and,
sure,
things like that. But that's pretty natural. I think what is for sure is that, Mary was this beautiful girl. I mean, everybody, all the papers talked about it. You had well-known people going in the cigar store, maybe just to see her.
Yeah.
She was that beautiful. So did someone get fixated on her? Because that happens today.
It does.
You think about people on TV, beautiful people. They get stalkers. They get people who, get fixated on them. That could be what happened in this case. Now you'd have to explain, was it one person or did this one person then recruit others? That the coroner might be throwing it off by suggesting that it was 2 or 3 or more persons.
Yeah, maybe he just can't realize how one person could do so much damage to the body, but we know today one person certainly can.
Yeah, maybe it could have just been a really strong person who did it all by themselves. I don't know. But that's it for our episode on the murder of Mary Rogers. We got a couple of voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Gibby and Mike. This is Lucy from Eureka, California, the true Northern California. And I was just calling to say that I love your guys' shows. I listen to both. I've been binging Unsolved for the whole weekend this weekend. And I had a case suggestion that's local to me. It's called the Humboldt Five. It's an unsolved series of murders from the, I think, early 90s up until recently. But it's an interesting case that you guys might be interested in looking at. I hope that you are well, and thank you so much for all the hours of listening.
All right. Awesome. We'll have to check that out. Put it on the list.
From urethra. That sounds like a start of a kidney infection or something.
That's because you just called it urethra. It's Eureka.
Oh, Eureka. Like the,
yeah, urethra does sound like something like that. But that's not where she's from.
Yeah, got that wrong.
Eureka. You know, like you just discovered gold. Eureka, California.
Or the sweeper vacuum.
Or that, too.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Brandy. I'm just at the gym. It's 3:30 in the morning. Been here since 3, getting my workout on. I just wanted to say I love the podcast. I love the banter between the two of you. I finished all of T-Cat, and I'm almost done with Unsolved. I think I have like 10 left of Unsolved, and then I'll go to Patreon. But again, guys, keep up the good work. Keep your head on a swivel, and keep your own time ticking. Love you guys.
I love it.
What'd she say? She's over at gyms and she's working out. What?
She's at the gym. It's 3:30. She's been there since 3 a.m. So she's very dedicated. Her schedule is very much like mine.
Not a person named Jim.
No.
The gym.
At a gym. The gym. Not at gyms working out. That would be a completely different scenario.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm off tonight on the voicemails.
I think, you've been off on a number of things. No, but that is dedication.
That is.
To get up at 3.
Man.
Or to get up earlier, because if you get to the gym at 3, that means you got up early.
You could do it.
I could, but I usually go to bed at 3.
Yeah, I say you wouldn't be waking up. You'd just be like finishing your night by going to the gym. But we all know that's never going to happen.
That's never going to happen. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
This summer, Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Summer of Cinema is here. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Mission Impossible, Beverly Hills Cop, Good Burger, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bring the action with you and stream for free from all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.